Biomolecules, those compounds which have a molecular weight less than 1000 Dalton. They are nothing but the biomolecules. Hydrogen, carboxyl group, amino group and a variable group designated as the R group. The lipid molecules are mainly made up of about 1 to 19 carbon atoms. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to a new chapter, that is chapter 9, Biomolecules. I am Dr. Divya, Biology faculty, Vidyashram Pre-University College, Mysore, Temple of Excellence. So we know that there are a lot of living as well as non-living organisms that are present in this world. And all of these have their own chemical structural arrangement. Say for example, if I take soil, it is non-living, right? But the soil has different components, chemical components such as the minerals, nutrients and all that present in them. Likewise, if I take the example of a living organism, be it a plant also has a lot of compounds that are present in them which help the plant as well as they also play a very important role in the human welfare as well. So all these components are present in a living organism as well as a non-living organisms. How do we know about it? It is by doing various experiments or chemical analysis of the plant. So in this particular chapter, we shall study how the chemical analysis of the living components or the compounds that are present in a living organism can be studied, and what are the different compounds that are present and what is their structure. All that we shall study in this particular chapter, that is biomolecules. So biomolecules, it is something to do with the living organism. So what molecules, the different chemical molecules or compounds that are present in the living organisms, we shall study in this particular chapter. So to begin with, we shall see how to analyze a chemical composition. So be it a human being, an animal or a plant, our whole body is made up of different chemical components. So blood, it is a chemical. What is there in the blood? There are different types of components that are present in the blood. Say for example, tissues. Tissues also have various chemical compounds, be it polysaccharides, the cellulose, the sugars, the different types of chemical compounds are present in the cells as well. So all these, how can you say what is there in that particular cell? That is by performing various experiments and undergoing various chemical analysis. So first, what can be done is how to analyze chemical composition. So for that we need a living material. So we shall take a plant. Why? Because plant, it is easy to find the chemical components that are present in a plant. So first we shall see what are the biomolecules that are present in a plant. So biomolecules, those compounds which have a molecular weight less than 1000 Dalton. They are nothing but the biomolecules. So carbon compounds are one such examples of biomolecules. So those chemical compounds having carbon atom in them. So in order to find out these carbon compounds, what can be done is in the laboratory, we shall take a living tissue, be it a liver, a kidney, or be it if it is a plant, we'll just take the leaf of a plant or the stem of the plant. So here I'll take the example of the plant leaves. So here I will collect a plant and I'll remove the leaves from the plant, neatly wash it, sterilize it, and then the plant leaves I will take. So plant leaves I will take. So now plant leaf is a living tissue, right? Plant is a living organism, and here the living tissue that I'm taking is the leaf. In the leaf there are the parenchyma cells, collenchyma, sclerenchyma and all that, and all these have different depositions in them, be it cellulose, suberin, different depositions and all that, and also it is made up of various chemical compositions. So what is there in them, we shall see. So in order to see that, first I will take the plant leaves, then I will grind it in trichloroacetic acid, trying to get a acid insoluble and a acid soluble fraction here in order to separate the components. So what I will do is, I'll take an acid that is a trichloroacetic trichloroacetic acid. So why trichloroacetic acid is used is, this formula is actually Cl3COOH. So I'll take trichloroacetic acid. So this trichloroacetic acid, why we will take is because it has the ability to dissolve most of the compounds, chemical compounds that are present in the tissue. So therefore, I'll grind it using, I'll take a mortar and a pestle. So I'll take a mortar and a pestle. So you might have seen the grandmothers and all, earlier they used to use a bowl with a handle in it, right, to pound onto spices or betel nut and all that to pound, they will use it. So the same thing we'll use in the laboratory also, or Ayurvedic preparation, those Ayurvedic medicine who will prepare, they all will use this. So I'll take a mortar and a pestle. So into this I will add my leaf material and I will pour in trichloroacetic acid. I'll pour in trichloroacetic acid and I'll grind it. I'll grind it into a paste. Once I grind it into a paste, what I'll do is I'll take a beaker and into the beaker I will put a cheesecloth. So cheesecloth, why? Because so that I can filter it. So that is why. So I'll put a cheesecloth and then whatever ground substance that I have got, that leaf paste that I have got, along with how did I make the paste? By pouring trichloroacetic. I took a leaf in the mortar, then so say for example, this is the bowl, that is the mortar. So this is the bowl that is there. So that to the bowl, I'll add the leaf material. To that leaf material, little by little, I'll keep on adding the trichloroacetic acid and I will completely grind the leaf material. So now I have a paste. That watery paste, what I will do with that watery paste is that I will pour it onto this cheesecloth. So I have taken a cheesecloth. Why cheesecloth? Means cheesecloth has pores which is easy for filtering. So therefore now I have covered this beaker. So this beaker I'll cover it with the cheesecloth. So now this paste I will take and put on this particular cheesecloth and I'll try to filter it. So once I filter, what happens here, all the solution, that is the filtrate, will come and fall in the beaker and remaining whatever is there, it will remain in the cheesecloth itself. So the paste will remain on the cheesecloth and whatever filtrate is there, that so liquid content, it will come and fall in the beaker. So now I have the filtrate in the beaker. So I'll strain the paste through a cheesecloth or through a cotton cloth and then I will get the filtrate in the beaker. In the beaker now I have the filtrate. Now this filtrate, what is there, I will collect it. I'll take it to another laboratory and I will subject it to various separation techniques. Now, in that filtrate, various types of carbon compounds will be present. So that I need to separate now. So what I will do is I'll do other experiments. That filtrate I will take, either I can do liquid chromatography or I can go in for paper chromatography and also separation using silica gel, thin layer chromatography. All these techniques I will follow and I will separate the compounds. So when the compounds get separated, all the compounds will get separated. So in that filtrate, what is there now? Different compounds are there as such. Then I will subject it to various other experiments such as chromatography, thin layer chromatography, paper chromatography and all that. And then I will separate the compounds. Now I have separate compounds being present. Those separate compounds, I will isolate them. Again, I will purify those compounds and then I will subject it to analytic techniques. So analytic techniques, what we will do is, we'll put it in an instrument. Say for example, in a spectrophotometer or a NMR spectroscopy, or again I will subject it to high performance liquid chromatography. All that we will subject it to analytical techniques and those analytical techniques will give us the molecular formula. So in that filter, I need to filtrate what we had collected, right? This filtrate what we have collected, various compounds are there, chemical compounds. If it is difficult for me to identify if all the compounds are there, it is just like the example of sand. So in sand, there is red sand mixed, white color sand mixed, or yellow color, brown color sand, all are mixed. So now when everything is mixed, it is difficult for me to say, right, what is there exactly in that. So just like that, now it is difficult for me to say what compound is there exactly in this. So first what I'll do is I'll take this compound and maybe I'll put it to one experimental procedure which is called as the paper chromatography. There I will take this filter and on the paper chromatography, I'll put a small liquid onto this paper, that is chromatography paper. Now all the compounds will get separated. So maybe I want it is compound A, compound B, compound C. I don't know the name. Name I don't know now. So compound A. So what I'll do is this compound I will take again, compound A. Now I want to know what is that particular compound A which got separated during this experiment using the filtrate and the chromatography paper. So this compound A I will scrape it out. Again I will purify it, and that purified compound I'll put it in a spectrophotometer. NMR spectrophotometer I'll put it to. So that is a machine. So that machine now it will give me a graph. So some graph will be given based different peak, one graph will be given. So based on the position of the graph, the chemist, if I take it to a person who is well versed in chemistry, he will tell me what is the structural composition of all these graphs. So then I will come to know that chemist will do all the things. He'll arrange the structure and he will like neatly give me one structure saying that this is the structure of that compound. Therefore, that compound A is so and so. Maybe that compound A is, say for example, it can be amino acid. So in that particular filtrate, this amino acid is being present. In that particular filtrate, this protein is being present. How will I know? Based on the spectroscopy data that I get. So therefore, the isolated and purified compound, it will be further subjected to analytical techniques in order to find out the molecular formula and what is the structure of the compound. So when I get the molecular formula, especially when I get the structure of the compound, I will be able to know what is that particular compound found in the filtrate. So this is one experiment which is conducted in order to understand how to analyze a chemical compound, or in order to understand what chemical compound is present in that particular plant filtrate that I have taken. So next there is one more experiment that can be done in order to find out the inorganic elements and the compounds that are present. So here again the same experiment we will do, but it is a different kind of a experiment. So here what we will do is we'll weigh a small amount of living tissue. Say for example, here I have taken 1 gram of living tissue. Say for example, again here 1 gram leaf I have taken, 1 gram leaf. And that 1 gram leaf, I will dry it. First, before that, what we will do is we'll take the wet weight. Why? Because I'm taking a fresh leaf. In that fresh leaf, what is there? Water content is also there. So it is a wet weight. I'll measure the weight. Say for example, this is 10 gram. Or the weight is 1 gram. So I'll take about 10 grams. Say for example 10 gram of leaf. That will be the wet weight because it is fresh leaf. So the fresh leaf weight is wet weight. Now these 10 gram of leaves, I'll put it to drying. What kind of drying? Shade drying. I'll dry it in the shade, and after few days, once it is completely dry, I will take the dry weight. Why is it the dry weight? Because water content would have been lost during drying, right? So why is drying usually done? In order to preserve the material. How will the material get preserved? Because during the process of drying, the water content will be lost. Here the water will evaporate during the drying process. Therefore, the dry weight will be there. So now think for yourself, will the weight be more or will the weight be less when compared to the wet weight? Okay. So here the weight will actually be less. Why? Water would have been lost. So therefore, say for example, here it is 5 gram. The weight has reduced to 5 gram. So now this 5 gram of dry weight leaves, I will take and I will burn it. So it will completely get burned and all the carbon compounds will be oxidized and it will be evaporated. So once it is burnt, what happened? Here, why am I burning it? Because I don't want to study about the carbon compound. I want to study about the inorganic compound. In order to study what are the different carbon compounds present in that particular material, I went into a previous experiment which I explained. Now, in that plant material, I don't want to study about the carbon compound. I want to study about the inorganic compounds that are present. So, if I need to study about the inorganic compounds that are present, the carbon compound will cause a problem at that time. So I need to eliminate the carbon compounds. So in order to eliminate the carbon compounds, what I did, I took a fresh leaves, then I dried the leaves, then those dried leaves, I'm burning it now. I've burnt it. When I burnt it, what happens? All the carbon compounds will be oxidized to gaseous form and they will leave the tissues. They will evaporate and they will get removed. Say for example, carbon dioxide, water vapor, whatever is remaining, everything will get evaporated and it will be removed. And what remains is the ash. In that ash, now it is easy for us to find out what are the inorganic compounds that are present. So ash is there. So in that particular ash now, this carbon compounds are not there. Therefore, I can easily find out what are the inorganic compounds that are present. So I'll take the ash, and this ash will contain all the inorganic elements that are supposed to be there in the plant, such as the calcium, the magnesium, etc. So these inorganic compounds such as the calcium, magnesium, sulfate, phosphate, all that are also seen in the acid soluble fraction. So therefore the acid soluble fraction can also contain the carbon compounds as well as the inorganic compounds. Now what I'll do is these ash again I will filter. So now in the filter, the filtrate will contain these inorganic compounds will be present in the filtrate. Again what I can do, I'll take the filtrate, again I will do the separation, then one particular compound I'll scrape out, I don't know the name of the compound, I'll scrape it out, then again put it to spectroscopy analysis. Then in the spectroscopy analysis what happens, again peak will be formed. So those peak, if I'm not able to interpret it, I'll take it to the chemist. So that chemist or the researcher is in chemistry, he will look at the peaks and he will give me the structure of the compound. Therefore, by looking at the structure, I can say what is there in that what that compound is actually. So this is how we try to analyze the experiment. So these are very two important experiments which can be conducted in order to find out the carbon compounds that are present in a living tissue and also the inorganic compounds that are present in a living tissue. So let us compare the elements that are present in the non-living and the living tissue in the case of a human body. So the presence of these compounds in a living and non-living tissue actually varies. So hydrogen in a non-living tissue, it is about 0.1%, whereas in living it is 0.5%. Carbon, it is 0.03% and it is 18.5% in the case of living. So therefore, what is understood that most of the components that are present in the living tissue is more when compared to that of the non-living tissue. And oxygen, it is about 46.6 in the case of non-living and 65 in the case of living. And nitrogen, it is very, very little, whereas in living it is 3.3. Then sulfur is 0.03 and it is 0.3 here. Sodium, it is 2.8 and 0.2. And calcium, it is 3.6 and 1.5. Magnesium, it is 2.1 and 0.1. Whereas silicon, it is 27.7 in the case of non-living, and in living it is completely negligible. So these are variations of the elements or the compounds that are present in the non-living as well as the living tissues or cells. So next, moving on to analyzing the different types of inorganic constituents that are present in the living tissue. So the living tissues or the living organisms are made up of sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, water and other compounds. So these are the inorganic compounds which do not contain carbon in them. So I have already told you about the experiment, how we can do in order to find out what are the different inorganic compounds are there. So usually in a living tissue, the different types of inorganic compounds that are present are sodium, which is natrium, Na+, potassium, K+, calcium, Ca2+, magnesium, Mg2+, water, that is H2O, O, and other compounds are also found such as the sodium chloride, the calcium carbonate, the phosphates and the sulfates. So these are the different inorganic compounds that are found. So inorganic compounds, those which do not have a carbon atom in them. So inorganic compounds are the ones that are found. So next, moving on to studying about these compounds one by one. So talking about amino acids. So amino acids are one of the important constituents of a living organism, because every organism there is presence of the protein. So proteins are made up of nothing but chains of amino acids. So amino acids, there are different types of amino acids that are present in a living organism. So amino acids are the organic compounds which contain an amino group and an acidic group as substituents on the same carbon, that is on the alpha carbon. They have an amino group as well as an acidic group. So as you can see here, the amino group is being present. So NH3 or NH2, it is the amino group, and also it has a acidic group, so a carboxyl group. So the two components that are present, they are present on the alpha carbon. So they present, both are connected to the alpha carbon. So we have the amino group towards one side that is connected to the alpha carbon, and there is the acidic group, that is the carboxyl, being connected towards the alpha carbon. So therefore amino acids are the compounds which contain an amino group and also an acidic group which are connected to the same carbon atom, that is the alpha carbon atom, and hence they are called as the alpha amino acids. So why are they called alpha amino acids? Because there is the presence of the amino group on one side and the presence of the acidic group on the other side, and they are also substituted methanes that are also present. So based on the type of substituents groups that are present, these are the substituent groups. So based on what is present in this particular region, say for example here on one side there is presence of the carboxyl group. So this is the alpha carbon. To the alpha carbon, on one side is present the acidic group, that is the carboxyl group, and on the other side is present the amino group. Now this region, that is the R region. So this is the R. So in this region, or it is the R group. So in this R group, what is exactly present in the R group? Based on that, the name of the amino acid will be given. For example, here, if in the place of R, if here H is present, that is hydrogen is present, then the amino acid is glycine. So there are 4 substituent groups occupying the 4 valency position. They are hydrogen, carboxyl group, amino group, and a variable group designated as the R group. Can you see here? One group is the amino group. So this is the amino group. So here I will show you, it is very clear. So this is the amino group, that is the first group, then comes the carboxyl group, then comes the R group, then also in the middle comes the alpha carbon. So therefore amino acid is made up of 4 substituent groups which occupies the 4 valencies or 4 position. So it occupies the 4 valencies, and they are nothing but so one is the hydrogen group, then next comes the carboxyl group, then the amino group, and then is the variable group. So what is the variable group? It is the R group, because it varies depending on what is there in the R region. The name of the amino acid will be decided. So therefore, based on the nature of the R group, there are many different types of amino acids. However, those which occur in proteins, there are only of 20 types. So the proteins that are produced in a living organism are made up of 20 different chains of amino acid. Therefore, depending on what type of amino acid it is made up of, the name of the protein will also be decided. So what are proteins? Proteins are compounds that are made up of chains of amino acids. So though there are lots of amino acids being present, the proteins are made up of only around 20 different types of amino acids. So we shall study about few of the amino acids here, that is the glycine and the serine. We shall see what they are. So the R group in these proteinaceous amino acids, they can either be hydrogen. So as I told you, if in the place of R group, if a hydrogen is being present, then it is a glycine. And in the region of the R group, that is in the variable group, that is in the R region, if a methyl group is present, so this is methyl CH3. If a methyl group is present, then the amino acid is alanine. So as you can see here, if a methyl group is present, then it is alanine. If a hydroxy methyl group is present, then it is a serine. So we take a plant material. Okay, I'll take a plant material. I will grind it. I'll grind it, take the extract, everything, and I will subject the extract for analysis. So in the analysis, they will find out that the amino acid is so and so. How will they find out is, they will get the structure based on the peaks that are obtained in the spectroscopy. They will get the structure. Now they will see in this particular region, that is this R region is there. No, in that particular region, if hydrogen is attached, or if it is made up of hydrogen atom, then it is a glycine. The amino acid is a glycine. If it is a methyl group that is attached in the R region, then it is a alanine. And if it is a hydroxy methyl group attached in the R region, this is hydroxy methyl group, then it is a serine. Therefore, there are 20 different types of amino acids in a protein, wherein we'll find out what type of amino acid it is made up of based on the compound that is attached in the R group. So that is one of the important characteristic features of the amino acid. And one more factor about amino acid is that amino acids, depending on the type of pH, it can be present in two forms. That is, it can be present in anionic form and cationic form, and also it can be present in Zwitter ionic form. So we shall see what these are. So this is the anionic form of amino acid. So this is an ionic form. So anionic form means here it is made up of a positive charge. Can you see here? It contains a positive charge. Therefore, it is an anionic form. So therefore, an amino acid can exist in an anionic form, and here as you can see, it has a negative charge. Therefore, amino acid can also exist in a cationic form. And apart from that, it can also exist in a Zwitter ionic form. So Zwitter ionic form means it will have both the positive and the negative charge. So here you can see they can also exist in the Zwitter ionic form. So what are Zwitter ions? So those compounds which have both a positive, which carry a positive as well as negative charge, is called as a Zwitter ionic compound. So therefore, they can exist in anionic form, in Zwitter ion form, and in cationic form. So this is one of the characteristic feature of the amino acids. And amino acids, usually they occur in the Zwitter ionic form. So this is the characteristic of amino acids, wherein usually they occur in the Zwitter ionic form. So one of the best example for the Zwitter ionic compound is the amino acids. And also I have told you how, based on the compound that substitutes the R group here, based on that the name of the amino acid will be decided, wherein if it has a hydrogen, if the R group is replaced by a hydrogen, it will be a glycine. If it is replaced by a methyl, it will be a alanine. And if it is replaced by a hydroxy methyl, it will be a serine. So this is the different types of amino acids that are present. And now we shall see about the lipids. Lipids are the biomolecules. They also come under the biomolecules because they have a low molecular weight of about 800 Dalton. And these lipids, they are insoluble in water. It is simple. You take a bowl of water, put any oil on it. Oil is also a lipid, right? Put any oil on it. Will it dissolve in water or will it float on the water? It will float on water because oils or fats or lipids do not dissolve in water. So therefore, lipids are water insoluble. And lipids, they can be simple fatty acids. What are fatty acids? So fatty acids are the ones which have a carboxyl group attached to an R group. So if you see here, in the place of the R group, they will have a carboxyl group being attached. So those are fatty acids. So you can see here, this is the carboxyl group. So those lipids, are simple lipids wherein in the place of R group, if a carboxyl group is attached, they are called as the fatty acids. So lipids are usually, they can be called simple fatty acids because in the place of the R group, there is a carboxyl group being attached, and the R group, it is not necessary that always like how in amino acid, based on what is attached in the place of R group, the name of the amino acid will be decided, right? Just like that, in the case of lipids, if a carboxyl group is attached in the R group, then the amino acid will be the fatty acid, or the lipid will be a palmitic acid. And apart from that, the R group can also be a methyl group, or it can be a ethyl group, or it can have a higher number of the CH2 group, that is 1 carbon to 19 carbons can also be present. So say for example here you can see this palmitic acid. Palmitic acid, how many carbon it has? It has 14. This is 14 carbon. So 14, here 1, then here 1. So 15. So 16 carbon atoms are there. So therefore, some of them may have about 1 to 19 carbon atoms. Say for example, palmitic acid has 16 carbon atoms. So the lipid molecules are mainly made up of about 1 to 19 carbon atoms. So apart from that, 20 carbon atoms or 1 to 20 carbon atoms can also be present. Say for example, here palmitic acid, as I said, they have 16 carbon atoms. Say here it is 14. So 14 here, 14 carbon atoms are there. Then here 1 carbon atom, here 1 more carbon atom is there. So therefore 14 plus 1, 16 carbon atoms. And in the case of glycerol, you can see there are 1, 2, 3 carbon atoms are being present. And in the case of palmitic acid, there are 16 carbon atoms being present. So therefore the number of carbon atoms in a lipid also varies. It can range from 1 to 19 carbon atoms. And also say for example, this arachidonic acid, which is also a lipid, it has about 20 carbon atoms, including the carboxyl carbon. It has a 20 carbon atom. Here also, including the carboxyl carbon, the palmitic acid has about 16 carbon atoms. So therefore the number of carbon atoms also will decide what type of lipid it is, not just the R group. And also the fatty acids, they could be saturated. So saturated fatty acids means those which do not have a double bond. So here this is a saturated fatty acid. Why? No double bonds are being present. Can you see here? This is one single bond. This is single bond. What is double bond? This is the unsaturated fatty acid. Why? Because they have a double bond. So remember, if a lipid molecule is made up of single bonds, then they are saturated fatty acids. And if they are made up of a double bond, then they are unsaturated. That is one or more double bonds. Say for example, here, can you see one or more double bonds are there? That is why it is an unsaturated fatty acid. So here, another simple lipid, that is in glycerol. So glycerol also, glycerol is also called as a trihydroxypropane. Why trihydro? It has a 3 hydroxyl group. 1 hydroxyl, second one, third one. So 3 hydroxyl groups are there. So glycerol is also called as a trihydroxypropane. So glycerol, it is also called as a trihydroxypropane. So glycerol is also one more example for a simple lipid. So what are simple lipids? They are nothing but having a carboxyl group attached to the R group, and this is also having a carboxyl group. Here it is another simple lipid which is a trihydroxypropane. So trihydroxypropane and glycerol is also one and the same. And there are many lipids which have both glycerol and fatty acids in them. So they have both the carboxyl group as well as the glycerol group being attached. So you can see here they have the triglyceride also being present and also the fatty acids. So here and all, depending on the R group, the fatty acids will be decided. And also they have a triglyceride group being attached. So this is about the different types of lipids that are being present. So also phospholipid, that is lecithin, is one of the examples. So phospholipid, why it is a phospholipid? Because of the presence of the phosphate group. Can you see this region here? Here it is made up of a phosphate group. 1 phosphorus molecule and 4 oxygen molecules. So therefore it is a phosphate group. So it is a phospholipid. So one of the best example for phospholipid is lecithin. So this is a fatty acid. So now I can easily say by looking at the structure, this is a fatty acid. Why is it a fatty acid? Because it has a carboxyl group being present. Therefore it is a simple fatty acid. So this is a glycerol. Why glycerol? 3 hydroxyl groups are there here. That is why it is a glycerol, and it is also called as trihydroxypropanol. And here this is a triglyceride. Why it is a triglyceride? There is a glycerol group also being present, and also there are the fatty acid groups also being present. Next, this is a phospholipid. Why is this a phospholipid? If you see here in the structure, there is a phosphate group being present. That is why it is a phospholipid. So next, coming to cholesterol. Cholesterol has a complete different structure wherein it has 4 hydrocarbon ring. 1, 2, 3, 4, and one of the hydrocarbon ring, it is attached with a hydroxyl group, and the main function of cholesterol, it is actually to synthesize various hormones as well, and the structure is also completely different. So by looking at the structure, I can easily say that this is a cholesterol. So therefore, looking at the structures, we can easily find out what type of compound is actually being present and what is the type of that compound. Say for example, if it is a lipid, what kind of lipid is present? If it is an amino acid, I showed you based on the R group what type of amino acid is present, we can find out. So this is about the compounds, that is the amino acid and lipid, how we can find them. So next here, in lipids, the fatty acids are found either esterified with glycerol, then be called as the monoglycerides, diglycerides and triglycerides. So based on the amount of glycerol being present, say for example here, I told you this is a triglyceride. So here glycerol, what is the formal structure of glycerol? It is CH2OH. So as you can see here, it is made up of 3 glycerol groups. Therefore it is a triglyceride. So therefore we can say here, as I told you here, they can be called, if only one glyceride is being present, it is a monoglyceride. If 2 glycerides are being present, it is a diglyceride. If 3 glycerides are there, glycerol groups are there, then it is a triglyceride. That is how also we can differentiate between number of, that is the glycerides, we can differentiate based on the number of glycerol groups that are present in that particular fatty acid. And also, they are also called as the fat and oil based on the melting point. So again, the lipids can be differentiated as fats and oils based on their melting points. Why? Because if it has a lower melting point, it is called as the oil. The best example is the mustard or the gingerly oil, and hence remains as oil in winter. Say for example, some of the lipids in winter, coconut oil, it becomes solidified during the winter, right? Why? Because it has a high melting point. Only in the summer, when the temperature is high, they will become a liquid form. Otherwise, it will become a solid form. Whereas oil, they are the lipids. Coconut oil can be considered to be a lipid. Say for example, in the liquid state itself, it will remain as oil itself even in winters as well. It will not become a solid state. So therefore, those oils which have a lower melting point even, and hence remain as the oil even in the winter, they can be called as the oils. And those which get solidified in the winters, they are called as the fats. So based on the melting point, we can differentiate lipids as fats and oils. And apart from that, there are also presence of phospholipids. I told you what are phospholipids. If they have a phosphorus group, that is, if they have a PO4 group that is present in them, they are the phospholipids. So usually phospholipids are present in the cell membrane, and the best example for phospholipid is the lecithin. And some of the tissues, especially those tissues that are present, that is the neural tissues, they have lipids which are more complex in structure. So lipids, they can be simple in structure as well as more complex in structure. So these are the different types of lipids. And phospholipids I had already explained to you. They'll have a phosphate group, and these phospholipids, they are usually found in the cell membranes, and the best example is lecithin. So this was about lipids. So next, moving on to some nitrogenous base compounds. So we studied about amino acid compounds, lipids, and then nitrogenous bases compounds. So carbon compounds, all these are carbon compounds that we are studying, and they are the biomolecules. So next, talking about the nitrogen bases. So carbon compounds having heterocyclic rings, they are the nitrogen bases. Say for example, there are adenine, guanine, cytosine, uracil, and thymine. Where are all these present? In the DNA. The deoxyribose nucleic acid are made up of all these, and also the ribonucleic acid, RNA. So if it is a DNA, they will have carbon compounds, that is the nitrogen based compounds such as the adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. If it is the RNA, they will have adenine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. So these are the different nitrogenous bases. So as you can see here, adenine, they have heterocyclic rings. So you can see they have heterocyclic rings, and one more thing is they have a amino group. So they have a amino group and they are made up of heterocyclic carbon ring. So this is one of the best example. So we have adenine, then one of the other example here also they have a heterocyclic. They're made up of one heterocyclic ring. Here they're made up of two heterocyclic ring, and they have a amino group as well. So therefore all these are nitrogen bases. The best example I've taken here is adenine and uracil. So adenine is a purine, and whereas uracil is a pyrimidine. So next, talking about the nucleotides. So if a phosphate group is also found esterified to the sugar, they are called as the nucleotide. That is, if a phosphate group is attached to a sugar, it is called as a nucleotide. So nucleotide, this is one big example for nucleotide. So here, as you can see, adenine, it is attached to a phosphate group. So this cyclic ring here, it is attached to a phosphate group. So P phosphate, O, 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 4 O's. It is attached to a phosphate group. So those, if the phosphate groups are attached to a sugar, then it is called as a nucleotide. So what are nucleotides? A phosphate group is also found esterified to the sugar. They are called as the nucleotide. For example, it is adenylic acid, thymidyllic acid, guanylic acid, uridylic acid, and cytidylic acid. So here I have taken the example of adenylic acid. So adenylic acid, as you can see, it is attached to a sugar group, that is the phosphate group is attached to a sugar group in this case. And next, talking about the nucleosides. So nucleosides are also attached to a sugar, but here there is no presence of a phosphate group. It is only attached to a ribose sugar. Either if it is a deoxyribose sugar or a ribose sugar, it will be attached, and they are called as, examples are adenosine, guanosine, thymidine, uridine, and cytidine. And DNA, RNA functions as a genetic material. All these are found in the DNA and the RNA. So as you can see here, there is presence of a sugar. A sugar molecule is being present. That is they are attached only to a sugar. So here itself you can see the difference. Here they attach to a sugar, that is adenine, it is attached to a sugar molecule. The best example is adenosine. So if it is uridine, the uracil will be attached to a sugar molecule. But here you can see, in the case of nucleotide, you can see the sugar molecule, adenine will be attached to a sugar molecule. The sugar molecule will be attached to a phosphate group. So if it is attached to a sugar molecule and a phosphate group, it will be a nucleotide. If it is only attached to a sugar molecule and there is no phosphate group being attached, it will be a nucleoside. So that is the difference. And all these are found in the genetic material, that is the DNA and the RNA, and they are very, very important for the normal processes that has to take place in the DNA as well as in the RNA, that is especially for protein synthesis. All these are very, very important. So these are about the different carbon compounds such as the nitrogen bases, the nucleotides, and the nucleosides. So I hope you understood the session very well, wherein we discussed about the biomolecules, which are nothing but the micromolecules, wherein we studied about the amino acids, the lipids, and also we studied about the different nitrogenous bases that and the nucleotides and the nucleosides. And also we studied, in order to study about all these compounds, we should perform an experiment. What kind of experiment? Where experiment on a living tissue, where it will be ground using trichloroacetic acid, and then it will be filtered, and that filtrate will be used for analyzing what type of compounds or biomolecules are present in that. So this was about today's session or this particular session, and in the coming session we shall study about, especially in plants, apart from these compounds being present, there are also compounds called as the primary and the secondary metabolites, which help the plants and also the human beings in different ways. So we shall study about that in the coming session. So we shall meet again in the coming session. Thank you.